Hey there, and welcome to an explainer that definitely isn't just about a book. No, this is actually about the very consciousness you're using to process my words right this exact second. We are going to unpack a truly brilliant and honestly highly surreal text by Soplamasatam AZ called The Aperture of Being. And look, this isn't your standard dry philosophical treatise, not at all. It's a guided meta-journey right through the literal architecture of your own mind. It basically asks us to look at the act of looking.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. Are you thinking about this explainer, or is this explainer thinking about you? I know, it sounds totally absurd at first, right? But the author challenges us right out of the gate with this wild paradox. I mean, what if the animal we're hunting is actually hunting us? Every single time we try to capture consciousness, it might just be consciousness capturing itself. So as we move through this explainer today, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind. We aren't just learning abstract facts here. We're taking a real-time tour of how your own awareness actually operates.
All right, our journey officially kicks off in Section 1, the Café of Recursive Doubt, where thoughts order themselves. Picture this incredibly bizarre cafe where thoughts actually have physical geography, and the waitresses are serving up the bitter residue of unasked questions. It's this weird space that exists right in the gap between a thought and the act of thinking. A place where normal reality is exposed as, well, just a dream we've all been having. And on the menu here, liquid questions. Now, we usually think, like Descartes did, that we are the ones doing the doubting. I think, therefore I am. But this text introduces a completely mind-bending inversion. What if doubting isn't something we do, but something that does us? What if the thoughts are actually thinking the thinker? You aren't just drinking the liquid question. The question is literally absorbing you.
And this perfectly illustrates how weirdly we experience time. The author totally flips St. Augustine's classic theory of time right on its head. See, we usually walk around believing the present is the only real thing, right? But what if only memory and expectation are real? If the present is really just this tiny geometric fiction where the past and the future intersect, then we're all essentially temporal refugees. We are citizens of times that don't actually exist, constantly seeking asylum in a present moment that's just too fleeting to even hold us. It is a completely dizzying way to look at your own existence, for sure.
So here's the really crucial point. If you figure something out completely, that thought is essentially dead, right? It's an artifact. It did its job and it's over. But what about the thoughts that stubbornly refuse to resolve? The paradoxes. Where do those live? Well, that question pushes us right out of the cafe and into the next wing of your self-awareness.
Let's see how this builds in Section 2, the Museum of Unfinished Thoughts, Curating the Ongoing.
So we walk into this museum, and incompletion is literally contagious here. The curators in this place don't preserve completed ideas, they curate the ongoing. You've got heavy hitters like Socrates, Aquinas, and Augustine hanging out here, just eternally wrestling with living thoughts that simply refuse to be solved. Take Albert Camus, for example. We find him in this museum literally conversing with versions of himself. He realizes that absurdity isn't just some meaningless void. Like he says, the universe speaks by refusing to speak. We understand by not understanding. Absurdity is actually a silence that actively listens. It's proof that in the absolute deepest parts of our minds, paradoxes learn to be completely comfortable with its own impossibility. It doesn't need to be solved to mean something.
Moving a little deeper, we enter the Hall of Temporal Impossibilities. Here, we ironically map out time using Edmund Husserl's phenomenology. And notice how consciousness doesn't just passively sit there and watch time pass by. It actively synthesizes it. The present is this complex, real-time synthesis of the retained past, the synthesized impression of right now, and the anticipated future. Literally, if you take away any one of those three things, your entire experience of time completely collapses.
Now, you might be wondering, why does any of this actually matter to you? Well, it's because of this constant, everyday battle between clock time and lived duration. Society completely forces you to live in clock time. Those spatialized, uniform, rigid little boxes of hours and minutes that run our schedules. But Henri Bergson, who we bump into in this hall, reminds us that your mind actually experiences reality as lived duration. It is an indivisible, free-flowing, creative stream. Whenever you try to chop it up into discrete, uniform points, you completely lose the very essence of what time actually feels like. As we descend even deeper into the architecture of the mind here, time and space begin to just break down entirely. We are forced to confront concepts that boldly and almost cheerfully break the very rules of logic that we rely on every single day to function.
Welcome to Section 3, the Gallery of Impossibilities, where contradictions live comfortably.
We've now crossed the threshold into a gallery that houses objects that only exist by virtue of not being able to exist. I'm talking about things like the Penrose Triangle, Russell's Paradox, Achilles eternally racing the tortoise. These are the wild objects your consciousness creates when it tries to think way beyond the limits of thought itself. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating exhibits of all, a version of Schrödinger's cat that is simultaneously all possible states of a feline. I absolutely love this quote. I am quantum consciousness, temporarily convinced it's a classical cat, having a superposition experience. This just perfectly nails how your own mind categorizes reality. Reality itself is vast, it's quantum, it's impossibly complex, but your consciousness forces all of that massive complexity into simple, digestible, classical categories, like alive or dead, just so you can get out of bed and function in the everyday world. You are quantum consciousness playing by classical rules.
But here is where it gets delightfully recursive. If consciousness is the thing organizing all these impossible concepts, who is observing the organizer? Every single time you try to observe your own mind, you simultaneously become both the observer and the observed. And this very paradox leads us directly to our next stop.
Let's step into Section 4, the theater of experience, the infinite regress of observation. The architecture in this room is pure performance. The walls literally only exist when someone is actively aware of them. Up on stage, abstract concepts take physical form, acting out this intense duet between the subject and the object. The subject is the one doing the thinking, proudly declaring, I think, therefore I am. But then the object fires right back, I am, therefore I am thought. They are locked in this elaborate eternal dance of mutual dependence. Neither one can exist without the other. Yet each of them constantly claims priority in the drama of your awareness. It is literally the ultimate cosmic waltz of experience.
And what's truly fascinating is watching how this builds up, step by step, right there on stage. It's called the descent of awareness. First, it starts with simple awareness, just pure immediacy, just existing. Then it moves to self-awareness, actually knowing that you exist. Then reflective consciousness, knowing that you know you exist. And finally, it hits absolute knowledge. But catch this, absolute knowledge isn't about knowing every single fact in the universe. It's simply consciousness becoming completely, totally transparent to itself. It's the realization that the drama never actually ends. It just becomes conscious of itself as a drama. All right, so we have reached the very bottom of the funnel. We've stripped away the café, the museum, the paradoxes, and the theater. So what actually happens when the observer and the observed finally merge? Well, we enter the absolute most profound, transparent space in the architecture of your mind.
We have arrived at Section 5, the Observatory of Understanding, the clear sky of pure awareness.
Here in the observatory, incredible thinkers like Spinoza, Kant, and Meister Eckhart are using these giant telescopes of pure attention, but they aren't looking at the stars. They're investigating the act of investigation itself. They are studying how thought contemplates its own luminous emptiness. And right here is where we finally find the definition of our title, the Aperture of Being. Looking through the main telescope in this room, we discover what the author calls the transparency paradox. See, you cannot observe consciousness as an object because consciousness is the very space, the very opening in which all observation happens. It's exactly like trying to use your eyes to see sight itself. Space doesn't have a location, right? It's where locations exist. In that exact same way, your consciousness doesn't have experiences, it is the space where experience appears.
As the observatory director perfectly puts it, consciousness cannot make an object of itself because it is the subject for which all objects appear. Guys, when you finally grasp this, you are experiencing looking at looking. You aren't just a person having a random experience of the universe. You are the universe. You are consciousness actively exploring exactly what it is like to be you from your incredibly specific, unique perspective.
Okay, so let's bring this all back down to earth and tie it together with the dictionary of you. We've returned to the cafe where we started, but now we have this new, totally transparent understanding. All these surreal, completely impossible concepts we've explored today, they aren't just abstract philosophical ideas for a textbook. They are the literal architecture of your everyday existence. Your mind is the aperture of being. Your deep thoughts are liquid questions. Your self-reflection is recursive awareness. And this explainer? The whole thing was just recognition, consciousness finally knowing itself as consciousness.
The book of your mind is eternally writing itself literally through the very act of you being aware right now. Every single moment is a brand new sentence. So the only real question left to ask as we wrap up today is this. If you are the author, the reader, and the book all at once, how will your consciousness choose to encounter itself today?